At Roslyn, where the harbor narrows and the land rises sharply, one parcel stands apart, elevated, sheltered, a natural amphitheater facing north toward Connecticut and west toward the distant haze of New York City. 216 acres, deep water access, dense forest for privacy, open land for sweeping views. The price is extraordinary. The buyer does not hesitate. His name is Clarence Hungerford Mackay, 25 years old, heir to the Comstock silver fortune and the Commercial Cable Company, an empire of undersea telegraph lines binding continents together. This is not a summer retreat he intends to build. It is an announcement. Beside him stands Catherine Dewar Mackay, 22, daughter of a United States Army general, a Livingston by blood. Old New York flows quietly in her veins. His wealth is Western, new, raw, explosive. Hers is colonial, measured, assured, inherited. Together, they represent the marriage that will define this coastline. New capital fused to old pedigree. They call it progress. History will call it the Gilded Age. For the architect, Mackay does not commission a firm. He commissions a man, Stanford White, 55 years old, partner at McKim, Mead & White, architect of the Washington Square Arch, Madison Square Garden, the Metropolitan Club. His name alone signals scale, permanence, authority. His reputation is unchallenged. His fees reflect it. Mackay never blinks. The instructions are precise. Not a house, an estate. A great hall capable of holding 200 guests. A music room designed for soloists, not salons. A dining room seating 40 without crowding. A library meant for serious collecting. Guest wings prepared for weekends of 20 or more. Terraces overlooking the water. Gardens stepping down to a private harbor. Staff quarters hidden, efficient, invisible. Every room must communicate consequence, not comfort. White listens, he sketches, he refines. When he returns with the final elevations, Catherine catches her breath. Clarence nods once, sharply. The budget, $2 million, roughly $70 million today. The timeline, 3 years. At peak construction, 200 men. Materials are drawn from everywhere but nearby. Indiana limestone, Italian marble, Belgian glass, Oregon timber, domestic copper. Nothing ordinary, nothing local, nothing replaceable. It is still 1899. William McKinley sits in the White House. The Spanish-American War has just ended. America now holds territories overseas, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, an empire abroad, mansions at home. The symmetry is deliberate. On the raw ground, wind pulling at her veil, Catherine stands beside Clarence as he shades his eyes against the glare off the Sound. In that moment, they believe something dangerous, that stone can preserve happiness, that scale equals safety, that a house, if grand enough, can hold back time, judgment, and doubt. Stanford White believes it too. He has built monuments before. This one, he thinks, will be different, lighter in spirit, less European palazzo, more American confidence. Stone rises, dreams harden, and the myth begins long before anyone calls it Gatsby. He names it Harbor Hill. The name sounds gentle, pastoral, almost modest. The estate will be none of those things. Ground breaks in July. Part 2. Workshop under sky. The first crews arrived by barge and wagon, surveyors carrying transits, engineers planting stakes, foremen holding lists already 2 pages long. They find forest, not meadow, oaks older than the Republic, maples thick as stone columns, undergrowth dense enough to lose a man within steps. Stanford White's plan demands the clearing of 40 acres without destroying what sold the site in the first place, the natural amphitheater of land and water. This is not logging, it is surgery. Trees are removed selectively, strategically. The survivors must frame the view, not interrupt it. Each decision permanent. By August, excavation begins. The foundation drops 12 feet at its deepest point, stepped carefully into bedrock where the mansion's core will anchor. The footprint stretches 160 feet across the front facade and runs 90 feet along the main axis. Crews rotate in shifts. Steam shovels claw at the earth. Teams of horses drag spoil along temporary roads, dumping it near the shore to raise low ground. The noise carries across the harbor. Fishermen complain. McKay's lawyers reply with plats, deeds, and silence. September brings stone. Indiana limestone arrives by rail, 60 tons in the first shipment, 300 by year's end. Each block is numbered to match White's drawings. Masons establish field shops, cutting sheds, mortar beds, a temporary forge for ironwork. The workforce swells. At peak, nearly 200 men, though the count shifts with the seasons. Masonry sleeps in winter, wakes in spring. Some workers stay 3 years, others 3 weeks. Their names survive only in payroll ledgers. Domenico Russo, Master Mason, 42, from Carrara. James Whitfield, lead carpenter, 51, trained in Edinburgh. Liam Brennan, 23, general laborer, drowns in 1900 when a barge overturns carrying copper flashing. No family located. Burial at public expense. The work does not pause. The system is industrial. Materials arrive on schedules tighter than passenger trains. Lumber from Oregon, old-growth fir, vertical grain, no knots larger than a dime. Copper from Montana smelters, rolled in Philadelphia, shipped in 600-pound coils. Glass from Belgium, each pane packed in sawdust and insured for replacement cost plus freight. Nothing is improvised. White's office issues revised drawings weekly. Contractors curse the precision and obey it. By 1901, the shell rises. Limestone walls climb beyond the second-floor line. Scaffolding wraps the structure, a timber exoskeleton braced with hemp rope and iron dogs. From the water, it resembles a cathedral mid-creation, European fantasy planted in American soil. White rejects the comparison. Not Gothic, he insists. Renaissance restraint scaled for the new world. Classical proportion, modern ambition. Roofing begins in the spring of 1902. Copper tiles, each stamped and soldered by hand, overlap in courses destined to bloom green within 5 years. Slate caps the secondary roofs. Lead flashing seals every joint. The ridge runs 140 feet. 4 chimneys rise another 20 feet above it, serving 17 hearths, depending on whether the servants' grates are counted. Inside, plasterers apply 3 coats: scratch, brown, finish. Electricians thread wire through hidden chases. Conduits disappear once the moldings are set. The lighting plan calls for 200 fixtures. In the Great Hall alone, 12 circuits are controlled from a single plate. Craft and technology meet without visible seam. By autumn of 1902, the house is not finished, but it is sealed. The roof holds. The windows close tight. Stand in the Great Hall and you hear wind, not rain. Clarence McKay visits weekly, Catherine less often. She is pregnant with their first child. The house waits. Part 3. Night of 1,000 Lights. June 14th, 1903. Harbor Hill receives its first guests. Not a grand opening, a rehearsal. 32 names chosen with care. Architects, patrons, editors from Harper's and Scribner's. Stanford White attends, seated near Catherine. Clarence rises for a toast, brief enough to signal confidence, long enough to acknowledge obligation. The dining room glows. Candelabra, 6 in total, 18 arms each, cast light that bends across silver, crystal, and pale gold damask. Menus printed in French list 7 courses. Wines move from Germany to France to California. The meal lasts 3 hours. No one complains. This is not indulgence, it is calibration. The true performance begins in 1905. By then, the Mackays settle into rhythm. Winters in the city, springs and autumns at Harbor Hill, summers split between Europe and Newport. Though Harbor Hill increasingly competes with Newport for space on the calendar, the estate demands presence. It is too large to ignore, too expensive to leave dormant. The house has been built to endure. But endurance carries weight. Stone holds memory, and soon it will hold more than celebration. Empty, a house merely ages. Lived in, it declares itself. Harbor Hill begins to speak through sound. They host musicians. In April 1906, Enrico Caruso sings in the music room, an unannounced private recital for 60 guests who arrived by special train from Pennsylvania Station. Stanford White's acoustics, refined with engineers from Carnegie Hall, carry Caruso's voice through open French doors and onto the back terrace without amplification. Guests stand outside, motionless, afraid to breathe. Catherine weeps openly. Clarence writes a check for $5,000 to the Metropolitan Opera's Education Fund. It clears within 48 hours. They host philanthropists. In 1908, a dinner raises funds for a tuberculosis sanatorium on Staten Island. 200 donors attend. The Grand Hall, stripped of furniture, holds long tables set for 20, aligned in 2 precise rows. Service requires 40 waiters borrowed from the Plaza Hotel, trained for 3 days on Harbor Hill's floor plan and the choreography of 12 courses. The evening raises $83,000. Editorials in the New York Times praise the Mackays' generosity, omitting that the dinner itself costs $12,000 to stage. They host scholars. This is Catherine's preference. Archaeologists, naturalists, historians. She establishes a lecture series, autumn evenings, lantern slides, subjects ranging from Egyptology to marine biology. Attendance is by invitation. Audiences rarely exceed 50. These nights feel different, quieter. The house retreats into its library in smaller salons, briefly returning to human scale. Clarence tolerates the series. He does not attend. They host society. This is the engine. Balls in 1909, 1910, and 1912, guest lists cresting over 300, orchestras, not quartets, set in the music room, with doors thrown open to flood the Grand Hall with sound. Flowers arrive from Pennsylvania greenhouses, roses, orchids, lilies arranged in columns 8 feet high, champagne ordered by the case, suppers served after midnight, dancing until 3. The ritual runs like machinery, invitations sent 6 weeks in advance, RSVPs tracked meticulously by Catherine's secretary, seating charts revised daily, menus approved by Catherine, wine lists by Clarence, floral schemes by both. Staff expands from 30 to 60 for these nights, extra footmen hired through Manhattan agencies, temporary cooks reinforce the kitchen's permanent team of 5. The cost per ball, $15,000 to $20,000, over $500,000 today, not counting wear on carpets, linens, crystal, not counting strain. Because beneath the light, something shifts. Photographs from these years show Catherine smiling, but the smile tightens. Clarence grows heavier. Portraits darken his expression. They appear together in public. In private, servants note quiet. Separate bedrooms, meals at different hours.
The house fills with guests and empties at dawn. The couple coexists with it.
Servants are the first to notice the change. Meals for two become meals for one, served in different rooms at different hours. The morning room, Catherine's domain, once crowded with books and correspondence, falls quiet in her absence. Doors close, curtains remain drawn. Clarence's study expands to fill the vacuum. He works later, sleeps less, drinks more. His physician visits weekly. The butler keeps brandy stocked in 3 locations without being asked. A house designed to project harmony now displays its opposite. The children witness everything. Catherine Mackay bears 3, Ellen in 1903, John in 1907, Catherine in 1909. They grow up inside a palace that has quietly divided itself. Ellen later writes of rooms that belonged to one parent or the other, and the rooms between, where the children played, careful not to choose sides. John leaves for boarding school at 12 and rarely returns on breaks. The younger Catherine develops migraines doctors cannot explain. Staff quietly suspect they are a form of escape. This is not metaphor, this is record. By 1915, Harbour Hill costs $80,000 a year to maintain, staff, utilities, taxes, repairs, roughly $2.4 million today. The mansion must be fed whether the marriage survives or not. Lawns require mowing, roofs demand constant attention, staff require wages. The house does not pause for personal crisis. Clarence pays, Catherine endures. The estate continues, but something essential breaks. Harbour Hill was built as a declaration, love made visible, fortune made permanent, family made dynasty. By 1916, it becomes something else, a stage set, a thing that must be maintained because selling it would admit failure, and failure is unthinkable. So the lights stay on, staff remain employed, gardens are trimmed, guests still arrive for weekends that, in photographs, look identical to those from a decade earlier. Same rooms, same rituals, same curated beauty. But walk through the house after midnight, after the guests have retired and the servants have withdrawn, and something shifts. Not ruin, not neglect, something harder to name. A palace that has learned loneliness, rooms too large for the people inside them, silence no orchestra can permanently cover. The house stands, the marriage does not. Outside, the world is changing in ways that will soon make both palace and pain feel like relics of a vanished age. Inside, the work continues. Harbour Hill at full stride requires 38 staff. Winter reduces that to 22. Summer travel trims it to 15, a skeleton crew preserving what absence cannot erase. These are not abstractions, they are names, wages, schedules measured in decades. Charles Brennan, head butler, arrives in 1904 and remains 23 years. His domain is the front of house, the visible machinery of service. He directs the footmen, coordinates with the kitchen, maintains the plate, silver for 40, crystal for 60, china in 3 patterns depending on the occasion. In 1915, his salary is $1,200 a year plus room, board, and livery, roughly $36,000 today. He supervises 8 people directly. The difference between order and embarrassment is his responsibility alone. Below him, hierarchy sustains grandeur. 2 footmen rotate during events. Their craft is motion without presence, opening doors, drawing chairs, pouring wine, clearing plates, everything done at the edge of a guest's vision. Training lasts 6 months. The best anticipate needs without seeking acknowledgement. They are furniture that breathes. 5 housemaids work in rotation, 2 for family rooms, 1 for guest wings, 2 for public spaces. Their day begins at 6 in the morning and ends near 8 at night. Meals are taken in the servants' hall, never the dining room. Tasks include beds, fires, lamps, dusting, laundry sorting, and despite modern plumbing, chamber pots when required.
Wages range from $18 to $25 a month. The head housemaid earns $35. They share the third floor, 4 beds to a room, 1 wardrobe between 2. The kitchen is another country entirely. Chef Augusta Villard, recruited from Delmonico's in 1906, commands a brigade of 5, 2 sous chefs, a saucier, a pastry specialist, and a kitchen maid who does not cook but scrubs, chops, and hauls. Villard earns $2,000 a year, second only to the estate manager. He earns it. Dinners for 30 require 4 hours of preparation. Balls for 300 demand 3 days and borrowed hands. Menus are planned weeks ahead, provisions ordered precisely, everything tasted. His standards are French, his temper notorious. Turnover in his kitchen is constant.
Outside, the grounds function as a living ledger. 12 men in summer, 6 in winter. Head gardener Thomas Crawford oversees 14 acres of lawn, seasonal flower beds, orchards yielding apples and pears, mostly for staff, and greenhouses pushing roses year-round. Grass is cut with push mowers. Motorized options exist, but McKay prefers quiet. Edging alone consumes 2 men for a full day each week. Trees are trimmed constantly. Every window must frame effortlessness. Effort is the point. The stables employ 4, a head groom, 2 stable hands, and a carriage driver who transitions to chauffeur as motor cars arrive. By 1912, Harbor Hill owns 3 automobiles. The horses remain for riding, not transport. Patrick Hayes, groom for 40 years, teaches Ellen McKay to ride side saddle, a skill she dislikes but masters. Below stairs runs a world governed by bells. 112 pull cords connect rooms throughout the house to a numbered panel in the servants' hall. A bell rings, a number flips, a servant moves. To the family, it is silence. To the staff, it is the pulse of every hour. Bells for breakfast, baths drawn, fires laid, carriages summoned. No bell goes unanswered. That is the contract. Payroll alone reaches $42,000 a year in 1915. Add provisions, uniforms, coal, and maintenance, and the figure climbs to $55,000, roughly $1.6 million today. That is the cost of invisible service. The staff understand what the family sometimes forgets. The house does not run on wealth. It runs on wages, hours, and hands that ache by nightfall. Those hands also carry pride. They maintain something larger than themselves. Harbor Hill is their work, too, even if their names appear on no cornerstone. Stanford White's name is carved into limestone above the garden entrance. Stanford White, architect, MD.CCI. The date marks completion, not ego. He does not need to announce himself. The building does it for him. Stand at the entrance gate, 500 feet from the house, and the logic reveals itself. The approach narrows, then opens. Sightlines unfold deliberately. Nothing is accidental. Distance becomes anticipation. Mass resolves into proportion. White understood something his clients believed instinctively. Architecture is not shelter, it is language. Harbor Hill speaks of ambition, of confidence, of control. It also speaks, quietly, persistently, of the cost of making permanence out of people. Stone remembers, and this house has already begun to remember more than it was meant to hold. The approach is theater. A gravel drive climbs in a gentle curve through trees Stanford White himself specified. Maples for autumn color, oaks for permanence, enough space between them to frame views without crowding them. Nothing abrupt, nothing accidental. The house reveals itself in fragments, first a chimney, then a roofline, and finally, as the drive bends one last time, the full facade opening into the forecourt. Not sudden, inevitable. Choreography in stone. The facade speaks a classical grammar with an American accent. Symmetry governs. The central block rises 3 stories, flanked by lower wings that step back and down, setting a rhythm, tall, short, tall, that balances mass with grace. Limestone, cream when new, warming toward beige by 1910. Corinthian columns at the main entrance take their proportions from Palladio, enlarged slightly. American patrons want European refinement, only bigger. White obliges, without vulgarity. Windows follow rules older than the Republic. On the first floor they are tall and arched, flooding public rooms with light. On the second, they shrink to rectangular openings suited for bedrooms. On the third, they simplify further for servants' quarters and storage, where ornament would be waste. The hierarchy is legible from the outside. You can read the house's social order before ever crossing the threshold. It is the terrace that reveals White's quiet brilliance. Harbor Hill sits on manufactured high ground, earth shaped into a platform. From the south facade, terraces descend in 3 broad stages toward the harbor, each level defined by balustrades, each transition marked by stairs wide enough for 6 people abreast. The descent is processional.
At the bottom, a pergola frames the view north across the Sound. Stand there at sunset and the house behind you glows. Stand at the house looking down and the water becomes the estate's horizon. White understood that great houses need great distance, not from neighbors, but from the ordinary world. Inside, the grammar continues. The entrance hall spans roughly 30 feet by 50, rising 22 feet to a coffered ceiling. Scale that declares importance without crushing intimacy. From here, circulation divides. To the left, the music room and library, Catherine's territory. To the right, the dining room and study, Clarence's domain. At center, the grand stair rises through a double-height volume, lit from a skylight 3 floors above. This is the heart. Every path arrives here or departs from it. White's genius lies in proportion, not novelty. He does not invent, he refines. Room dimensions obey ratios European architects codified centuries earlier, height to width, length to height. The golden section recurs, roughly 1.618 to 1, in doorways, window spacing, and the relationship between floor area and ceiling volume. The proportions feel right without announcing themselves. The eye rests. The body moves naturally. You do not think about architecture, you simply live inside it, convinced the space could not be otherwise. Set Harbor Hill beside its European ancestors, Tuscan Renaissance villas, Palladian estates in the Veneto. White borrows their language, loges, colonnades, proportional systems, but he translates. European villas grew from agricultural estates, where symmetry reflected farm logic. Harbor Hill grows from industrial wealth, where symmetry asserts control. Same vocabulary, different sentence. The result is a house that photographs beautifully and lives well. Rooms flow without confusion, light arrives generously, views align, hall to terrace, terrace to water, linked on precise axes. Stand at the center of the main floor and you can see through the house to the Sound beyond.
This is enfilade. The French named it. White perfected it for clients who wanted Europe without leaving America. Architecture as argument, space as proof. Harbor Hill says wealth, yes, taste, yes, power, yes, and restraint. It succeeds at all of them. But someone had to pay for it. Clarence Mackay inherited an empire measured not in land, but in miles of copper wire laid on the ocean floor. His father, John William Mackay, arrived in California in 1851 with nothing. By 1873, he co-owned the Comstock Lode, the richest silver strike in American history. By 1884, he owned something more valuable, the Commercial Cable Company. Its purpose was simple in concept and staggering in execution.
to bind continents with telegraph lines laid across the Atlantic when most still considered the technology experimental. Messages traveled as electrical pulses through insulated copper, resting roughly 3 miles beneath the sea. Each cable cost about $1 million to manufacture and lay. Each was vulnerable to ship anchors, undersea earthquakes, slow corrosion. When they worked, they collapsed time. A message that once took 2 weeks by steamship arrived in roughly 2 minutes. Speed bred monopoly. By 1900, commercial cable carried about 23% of all transatlantic telegraph traffic. Annual revenue reached $4.2 million, roughly $130 million today, with profit margins approaching 40% in strong years. Clarence Mackay assumed control when his father died in 1902. He was 28. Harbor Hill was still rising. The timing was deliberate, but the technology was already being hunted. Wireless telegraphy, radio, signals that did not require copper on the ocean floor. In 1901, Guglielmo Marconi proved a transatlantic wireless signal possible. What seemed miraculous to the public looked existential to cablemen. Harbor Hill stood as wires beneath the sea began to lose their dominance. Stone declared permanence. Technology promised speed, and history was already choosing between them. The same year Harbor Hill's walls climbed past the second floor, a signal crossed the Atlantic without touching the sea. The transmission was crude, unreliable, limited to Morse code. But it required no seabed cables, no repair ships, no million-dollar strands of copper, only towers, transmitters, and current. Clarence Mackay saw the threat immediately. He answered with expansion.
Between 1902 and 1910, commercial cable opened 4 new Atlantic routes, established offices in 12 additional cities, and poured roughly $2 million into equipment upgrades. Diversification followed: domestic telegraph service, messenger delivery across Manhattan, experimental wireless research meant to hedge against Marconi's advance. Mackay negotiated personally. He traveled to London quarterly. Twice he testified before Congress, defending cable monopolies against antitrust efforts. The work was relentless, the returns substantial. In 1907, Mackay's personal income from commercial cable and related holdings reached $800,000, roughly $24 million today. Enough to maintain Harbor Hill, the Manhattan townhouse, the Newport cottage, and the staffs at all 3, and still bank half. But fortunes built on technology die by technology. By 1912, wireless had improved. Marconi's company launched commercial transatlantic service. That April, the Titanic disaster broadcast wireless distress calls that summoned rescue ships and saved lives. Public sentiment shifted overnight. Wireless was no longer experimental, it was essential. Markets agreed. Marconi shares tripled between 1911 and 1913. Commercial cable stagnated. Mackay adapted again. In 1914, he merged commercial cable with postal telegraph, forming the second-largest telegraph company in America after Western Union. The merger delivered economies of scale, eliminated rivalry, and produced short-term profit. It also signaled retreat. Mergers are what companies do when growth ends. War complicated everything. In 1917, the United States government seized control of international cable traffic for national security. Compensation was promised, paid slowly, and calculated below market value. Mackay's revenue fell by roughly 30% in a single year. Costs did not fall. Maintenance continued. Payroll continued. Interest on loans used to finance the postal merger continued regardless. By 1918, Mackay's personal income had slipped to $400,000. Still large, still sufficient, but half of what it had been 6 years earlier, and the trajectory was unmistakable. The technology that made him rich was being displaced by a technology he did not control. Harbor Hill noticed. Staff cuts began quietly. A gardener retired and was not replaced.
Guest suites opened less often. Balls became annual instead of quarterly. The wine merchant stopped adding new vintages. No announcements, only adjustments. Servants noticed. Tradesmen noticed. Society did not, yet.
The house still shone, the lawns remained immaculate. The facade showed no cracks, but the fortune beneath it was thinning, and the weight above was not. April 6, 1917, America declares war on Germany. By April 20th, Harbor Hill declares itself as well. The Grand Hall that hosted 300 dancers the previous autumn now seats the North Shore Women's War Relief Committee. 70 women gather at tables once reserved for champagne and dessert. They roll bandages. Catherine McKay presides. Her organizational skills, dormant in social life, become essential. She sets quotas, 500 bandages per session, each rolled to Red Cross specifications and inspected before packing. The women work in shifts. Some bring servants. The servants work beside them. This is not symbolism. This is production. By summer, the transformation deepens. The music room becomes headquarters for Liberty Bond drives. Local banks send representatives. McKay pledges $50,000 personally and underwrites another $100,000 in bonds sold to employees of commercial cable and postal telegraph. His name appears in newspapers not for entertaining, but for duty. Society pages give way to civic notices. The dining room still hosts fundraising dinners, but the tone changes. Menus shrink to 4 courses instead of 7. American wines replace French. Proceeds support the Red Cross, the YMCA, and camp libraries for soldiers training at Camp Upton, 30 miles east. Guests arrive in evening dress and leave their jewels at home. Excess is suspect now. Restraint is virtue. In October 1917, Catherine offers Harbor Hill for convalescent use if needed. The offer is recorded, acknowledged, and filed. Long Island hospitals still have capacity, but the gesture matters. The estate that once symbolized private wealth now offers itself for public service. The staff adapts. Charles Brennan, the butler, organizes a war savings plan. Employees pledge 5% of wages to Liberty Bonds. Officially voluntary, practically universal. Patriotism and peer pressure blur easily. By war's end, Harbor Hill staff will have purchased $4,000 in bonds, roughly $120,000 today. Brennan keeps the ledger. Every dollar accounted for, every bond redeemed. Clarence's contribution is less visible, more costly. Commercial cable donates transmission capacity for military communications. Transatlantic lines carry coded messages, prioritized over commercial traffic. Revenue falls.
McKay does not complain publicly. Privately, his accountants calculate the loss, $80,000 in foregone income by November 1918. He seeks no reimbursement. The war also brings new kinds of guests. In the spring of 1918, Harbor Hill hosts a weekend for officers from Camp Upton. Uniforms replace tuxedos. Conversations shift from markets and marriages to artillery ranges and casualty lists. The orchestra does not play. The house listens. Stone that once echoed with music now absorbs quieter sounds. Boots on marble. Voices lowered by war. A future arriving faster than anyone planned. Harbor Hill still stands, but the music has changed. Majors, colonels, a brigadier general. The gathering is framed as morale and fundraising, but it is also a test. The officers tour the grounds, dine in the formal room, and listen as a string quartet performs Brahms and Dvorak, nothing German. Photographs capture uniforms posed on the terrace, sound behind them, expressions measured. These men are being honored, but they are also being assessed. Society is watching. The question is not whether the wealthy will gesture, but whether they will share. Clarence McKay passes. He writes another check, $25,000 to the Camp Upton Welfare Fund. The sum is noted, the message understood. Harbor Hill has done what is expected of it.
Yet something has shifted, and it will not shift back. Harbor Hill opened as a declaration of private achievement. It staged private pleasures for private circles. War forced it open. Committees replaced guest lists. Causes replaced indulgence. Strangers walked halls built for intimates. The house fulfilled its duty, and once opened, the door does not fully close. After the armistice in November 1918, life does not return to 1914. Parties resume, but smaller. Guest lists shrink. The tone never regains its former lightness. People have seen too much, spent too much, lost too much.
They have also seen inside places like Harbor Hill, not as invited guests, but as citizens with claims. The house remains grand, but grandeur alone no longer justifies itself. Clarence and Catherine sense this without naming it. They continue to host, the rituals persist, but the center has moved. 20 miles west in a rented cottage, someone else is watching. His name is F. Scott Fitzgerald. The year is 1922. He rents a house in Great Neck, modest by Gold Coast standards, close enough to see the mansions, close enough to hear weekend music drifting across the water. He is 26. His first novel, This Side of Paradise, made him famous 2 years earlier. His second, The Beautiful and Damned, sold well but drew mixed notices. He needs a third book, and he needs it to be different. So he watches. Fitzgerald attends parties along the shore, not at Harbor Hill, which remains beyond his standing, but at estates near enough in spirit. Columned facades, terrace lawns, motor cars and yachts delivering guests, orchestras playing until dawn, champagne flowing in quantities that turn prohibition into a technicality. He studies the performers, men who minted fortunes through war contracts, speculation, real estate, women who married money, titles, or both. Everyone performs wealth. Everyone performs joy. Everyone performs the belief that 1922 will last forever. Fitzgerald recognizes the performance because he is performing it too. His income in 1923 is $28,000, roughly $500,000 today. Substantial for a writer, inadequate for this shore. His capital is literary celebrity, not dynasty. He stands inside the world, but not of it. It is the perfect angle for observation. In the autumn of 1923, he begins drafting. The working title is Tremilkio in West Egg. The setting divides into 2 fictional peninsulas, East Egg and West Egg, mapped directly from Sands Point and Great Neck, where Harbor Hill stands. The plot takes shape. A mysterious millionaire stages extravagant parties in a mansion designed to impress a woman across the water. She is married, unattainable, the embodiment of what he desires but cannot hold. The parallels are not exact. Gatsby's house is Georgian colonial, not Renaissance. The parties are wilder, less curated, but the geography is precise. Gatsby stands on the western peninsula, gazing east toward old money, settled names, inherited security. Harbor Hill's view reversed. Fitzgerald completes a manuscript in October 1924 and revises through the winter. The title changes. The Great Gatsby is published on April 10, 1925. Sales disappoint. Roughly 20,000 copies in the first year. Respectable, not spectacular. Reviews divide. Some praise the prose. Others dismiss the plot as thin, the characters as unlikable. Fitzgerald earns under $2,000 in royalties. His editor at Scribner's offers reassurance. The book will find its audience, he insists, eventually. He is more right than he knows. But in 1925, Harbor Hill does not notice. The Mackays do not read Gatsby. Their staff does not discuss it. The novel slips quietly from the lists and drifts into the seasonal current of American fiction. Only later does it return. Reissued for soldiers during the Second World War, adopted by universities in the 1950s, canonized in the 1960s. By 1970, The Great Gatsby sells more copies each year than it sold in its entire first decade. The Gold Coast of the novel, shimmering, doomed, forever paused in the summer of 1922, becomes more real than the historical shore. People come to Long Island looking for Gatsby's house. They find estates, some preserved, many erased. They ask about the parties, the green light, the dock where Gatsby reached across the water toward a dream he could never quite name. Guides point to inspirations. Harbor Hill is always mentioned. The location fits, the scale fits, the striving made visible in stone fits most of all. But Gatsby's house, like Gatsby himself, is composite. A dozen estates contributed fragments. Fitzgerald invented the rest. What matters is this: the novel gave permanence to the temporary. It turned wealth into myth, excess into elegy, a single summer into something universal. Harbor Hill hosted real parties for real guests who are mostly forgotten. Gatsby hosted fictional parties for fictional guests who do not die.
Harbor Hill's guests were mortal. So was the fortune that carried them. October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. 16 million shares trade in a single day. Fortunes evaporate between opening and closing bells. Clarence Mackay is not destroyed. His wealth is not concentrated in equities, but he is wounded. Postal telegraph, trading at $42 in September, sinks to $18 by November. It never recovers. The immediate impact feels muted, but the sound that follows is not silence. It is time, finally catching up. No mass dismissals, no wings sealed overnight. Harbor Hill in 1930 still looks like Harbor Hill in 1928. The change is mathematical, not theatrical. Annual maintenance in 1930 runs to $95,000, roughly $1.7 million today. Investment income is down nearly 30% from its 1928 peak and still falling. Clarence Mackay trims with care. The wine cellar stops expanding. Weekend parties thin. The Christmas orchestra contracts from 22 musicians to 14. Adjustments, not surrender. The depression deepens. By 1932, postal telegraph is operating at a loss. Businesses slash communication costs. Revenue collapses. Western Union survives on scale. Postal survives on Clarence Mackay's willingness to subsidize it. Between 1930 and 1935, he injects $1.2 million of personal capital, roughly $27 million today, into the company. The goal is not growth, it is preservation. Jobs, service, and the family name printed at the top of every letterhead. Harbor Hill pays the price. Promotions reductions move from suggestion to policy. The gardening crew falls from 12 to 7. 3 housemaids go. The chauffeur remains. 2 stable hands do not. Charles Brennan, the butler, accepts a 10% pay cut rather than dismissal. He stays. Others leave. By 1935, the permanent staff stands at 22, about half its pre-depression size. Taxes accelerate the decline. Property taxes in 1925 total $12,000 a year. By 1935, they reach $28,000. The assessment more than doubles despite collapsing values elsewhere. The reason is simple. Harbor Hill's improvements are permanent. Mansion, stables, greenhouses, terracing, fixed assets the county can measure and tax. Land values fall, buildings remain. The burden hardens.
Clarence challenges the assessment 3 times. He loses twice. He wins a partial reduction once. The county needs revenue. Estates like Harbor Hill are dependable. Sympathy is scarce. By 1936, Clarence is 62. His health deteriorates. Diabetes poorly controlled. Cardiac strain worsened by stress. His physician prescribes rest, less travel, fewer responsibilities. Clarence ignores the advice. Postal telegraph needs him daily. Merger talks with Western Union begin, stall, resume, stall again. The company bleeds. He cannot stop it. He can only slow it. Catherine appears at Harbor Hill intermittently. What began as estrangement has hardened into legal form. Appearances together are rare. When they occur, photographs show two people aged beyond their years. Catherine is 59 in 1936 and looks 70. Clarence looks worse. The house begins to show restraint that reads as wear. Not neglect, McKay will not allow that, but deferral. Paint scheduled for refresh is postponed. Carpets due for replacement are turned. In 1937, the roof leaks. Repairs come slowly, room by room, as cash permits. A stain blooms on the ballroom ceiling. Visitors pretend not to notice. Prospective buyers begin to arrive. Between 1936 and 1940, 4 serious inquiries surface. Developers want the land. Institutions want the building. Every offer shares the same pattern. Valuations at a fraction of construction cost. One bid in 1938 proposes $350,000 for the entire estate. McKay spent $2 million on the house alone. He refuses. Refusal is not a strategy. It is pride. By 1940, the question is no longer whether Harbor Hill will be sold, but whether it will be sold whole or in pieces. Clarence delays the answer. War arrives first. December 1941, Pearl Harbor. America mobilizes. Clarence McKay is 67, too old for service, too ill for heavy war work. He offers what remains available to him: postal telegraph capacity for military communications, bond purchases, visible support. The government accepts. The gestures do not reverse his financial decline. Years earlier, Catherine had moved from estrangement to legal separation, not divorce, but a formal division of property and obligations, recorded in public filings and covered by the press. The result is clear. She retains the Manhattan townhouse and ongoing support. He keeps Harbor Hill and the failing telegraph interests. Whether that is an asset or a burden depends on the year. Clarence now lives at Harbor Hill alone. Staff has dwindled to 14. Entire wings close. The ballroom, unused since 1939, is shuttered to save heat. He occupies his study, his bedroom, the small dining room. The great hall echoes. Meals are served to one. Clarence had remarried in 1931 to Anna Case, an opera singer, 41 years old, 26 years his junior. Society whispered. The marriage is brief, strained, and by 1944 functions largely on separate tracks. Anna favors Manhattan. Clarence remains on Long Island, increasingly isolated and unwell. Clarence McKay dies on November 12, 1938, at age 64. The dates matter. Rumors often tangle them. His death precedes America's entry into the war. His second marriage long predates it. What follows is not society coverage, but statute. After his death, Harbor Hill passes into executorial hands. Anna contests portions of the will. Catherine's earlier settlement stands. The children, Ellen, John, Catherine, receive shares but not control. Ellen, who married Irving Berlin in 1926 against her father's wishes, was disinherited and later partially restored. The result is complex, litigated, and slow. During these years, Harbor Hill deteriorates. A caretaker and 2 groundsmen remain. The house is winterized but unheated. Pipes freeze in 1940, flooding the north wing. Repairs wait on court approval.
In 1941, vandals break windows. Local teenagers wander the empty mansion, not abandoned, merely unoccupied. By 1942, the family decides to sell. Wartime is the wrong market. Buyers are scarce. Developers cannot secure materials. The estate lists at $400,000. No offers. The price falls to $300,000. One inquiry, no contract. By 1945, the ask is $250,000 for a property that once cost more than $3 million to build and furnish. In 1947, a buyer appears, not for the house, but for the land. A developer proposes Harbor Hill Estates, roughly 60 residential lots carved from 216 acres. The mansion is an obstacle, not an asset. Demolition is built into the offer.
The family accepts $190,000, roughly $2.7 million today. The deal closes in August. Demolition begins in October 1947. 6 months of methodical erasure. Stone by stone, Harbor Hill exits history, not in fire or scandal, but in silence. Salvage crews arrive first. They move carefully, selectively, with ledgers and crowbars. Marble mantels are lifted whole, crystal chandeliers lowered piece by piece, mahogany paneling numbered, dismantled, and sold to dealers and homeowners seeking instant grandeur. The grand stair, White's spine of movement, is removed in sections. What can be reused is reused. What can be sold is sold. Then the shell follows. Dynamite, wrecking balls, limestone walls reduced to rubble, crushed and carted away as fill. The copper roof stripped and weighed for scrap. By April 1948, the site is bare. 45 years after completion, Harbor Hill is gone. Not slowly, not by neglect, deliberately, efficiently, gone. Photographs remain. Measured drawings sit in archives. A few fragments survive, gates, garden elements, orphaned details now housed in museums or private collections. But the house itself, the three-dimensional fact Stanford White drew and hundreds of hands built, no longer exists. The land is subdivided. 60 houses rise where one once stood. Families mow lawns, unaware that their backyards once held orchestras, that champagne flowed where swing sets now sit. And across the water, Gatsby's mansion is never demolished. It stands forever, lights glowing, music drifting, hosting a party for guests who do not age. The irony is precise. Fiction preserved what fortune could not. Harbor Hill's destruction was not unique. Between 1940 and 1960, more than 200 Gold Coast estates were erased. Taxes rose, maintenance costs soared, social values shifted, suburban development pressed inward. The pattern repeated. Families sold, developers bought, bulldozers arrived. Mansions that took years to build vanished in months. But loss produced resistance.
In 1956, the National Trust for Historic Preservation was founded, driven in part by outrage over these erasures. In 1966, Congress passed the National Historic Preservation Act, creating legal frameworks to identify and protect significant places. States followed. New York established landmark designation processes. Local historical societies organized, documented, protested. Some estates survived. Oheka Castle, built in 1919 just 8 miles from Harbor Hill, was saved in 1984 and reborn as a hotel and event space. Old Westbury Gardens, completed in 1906, was preserved by the Phipps family and opened to the public in 1959. Sands Point Preserve, the former Guggenheim estate, was rescued from development in 1971 and now functions as both historic site and nature preserve. These victories share a formula: community advocacy, financial creativity, adaptive reuse. Museums, schools, event venues, ways to keep great houses alive in a world that cannot sustain staffs of 38. Harbor Hill taught preservationists what silence costs. Today, organizations like the Society for the Preservation of Long Island Antiquities, Preserve America, and local historical societies maintain archives, offer technical support, and mobilize public pressure when demolition looms. Success is never guaranteed, but the fight now happens publicly, loudly. You are part of this. Every time you visit a historic house museum, you justify its preservation budget. Every time you share a story like this, you strengthen the cultural case for saving what remains. When a local estate faces development, your letter, your presence at a hearing, your voice matters. Harbor Hill cannot be rebuilt, but dozens of estates like it still stand, vulnerable, waiting. The workers who built Harbor Hill are gone. The family that commissioned it is gone. The architect, the guests, the orchestras, all gone. What endures is the record, the images, the stories, and the choice we make now about the houses still standing. Gatsby is fiction. The losses are real. The next rescue is ours.